all for joining us for our Crowley ISD Community Conversations. It's great to have you all here this evening for the first in our series of Community Conversations. Dr. McFarlane, we've got a great group logging in as we speak. We have some panelists here with us. We have a board member or two. We're excited to get started tonight.
No doubt. There's definitely going to be a great conversation. I can tell already. Excited about the conversation.
So what's going on tonight? We're having our Crowley ISD Community Conversations about building meaningful relationships between students and police officers in Crowley ISD. We're going to talk about some plans that are coming to Crowley ISD to promote safety in school, but also to build relationships in our community. We have a great group of panelists that we'd like to introduce this evening, representing our students, staff, faith-based partners. So it's a great group tonight. But Dr. McFarlane, I'd like to start with our school board president, Ms. Mia Hall. I know we have several other school board members on as attendees, but want to allow Ms. Hall to say hi to the group before we get started tonight. Hey, Ms. Hall.
Hey, how are you doing tonight, Anthony?
Great to see you, ma'am.
Thank you. Well, good evening to everyone. I did prepare a few remarks only because it's the end of a long day and I didn't want to leave anything out. So if I read a little bit, please offer me a little bit of grace today. But I did want to thank everyone for being here this evening to offer their feedback and their guidance as we embark on the development of a police department in CISD, or exploring the opportunity. As a parent, a community member, this is a subject that has been under consideration for quite some time. And while it comes at a time in our country where there is so much discourse surrounding the topic of policing, I believe it is a huge opportunity for us to begin re-envisioning policing in our schools, specifically our Crowley ISD schools. So myself personally, my professional job, I'm an executive director in an equity department in a neighboring district. And so as an equity champion, a former history teacher, and a mother of an African-American male, and I'm a CISD citizen like everyone else. I am very grateful that you're here tonight to give us food for thought, as well as provide inputs as we set goals for moving forward. Your voice is very important to the board. It's important to Dr. McFarlane and his leadership team, and it's imperative to the leader that Dr. McFarlane selects to lead us as our inaugural chief. So Crowley ISD is more than a district to me. I think it is to most people, as evidenced by your participation tonight and of all the viewers that are out there. We are a family, and I'm excited about tonight's discussion, our family discussion. So thank you for your commitment to the students of CISD and for sharing in the responsibility for making Crowley ISD a place for all students, where they can feel safe, where they can thrive, and where they can reach their fullest potential. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to address the panel and to our stakeholders in Crowley ISD. I'm excited about this initiative, and more importantly, I'm excited to hear your feedback, your commentary, and hear from your hearts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Thank you for your leadership and all that you do as a volunteer on our school board. We know you're very invested in the success of our students and staff, so thank you. Dr. McFarlane, you want to talk about why we're here tonight?
Yeah, no doubt. Again, I just want to echo your comments, Mr. Kirsten, to Ms. Hall and the Board of Trustees. I tell you what, it is a privilege to be able to work with a group that is really vested in what happens in our district and what happens within our community. I can just be honest with you, and if I had my choice and my initial thought process was for us to go through the process of finding a chief, making a decision, and then moving forward. But it was the board who was very clear to say, let's hear the students' voice, let's hear the community's voice, because we will know when we hear their voice, we will have a better result. And so I appreciate the board for their leadership and guidance and direction. So what I want to do is just talk a little bit briefly about why we're here. And I know that we all recognize that we're all in the middle of a crisis, been in a crisis for quite some time, both with the pandemic, but also with the social unrest and everything that's going on in our society. We recognize that crisis will be a great way to describe what we are in as a country and as a community. But what I believe is this: I believe that in every crisis, there is an opportunity and an opportunity to make things better. And I think that what we have here in Crowley ISD is really an opportunity. We have an opportunity to actually engage in a conversation about policing, about the relationship with police and with students and with schools and students and with communities and police and students. And so we have this opportunity to kind of create and have a dialogue around what's ideal and how can we create that. As you all have heard and probably know by now, we are in the process of actually hiring a police chief and then eventually hiring a police department. And what better time is it to have a conversation about what we want than at the very beginning when we create it. And I just think this is a perfect opportunity. Thank you to the ministerial leaders that are on the call tonight. Thank you to also the other experts, the panelists. I do believe that this will be a great discussion. And I really am interested in hearing what the kids have to say, what our community has to say, because we'll take the information and then use that information to make the best decision possible. Our mission in Crowley ISD is, number one, that we have thriving students. We have an engaged community and we have empowered staff. And we believe that having these conversations is a key strategy in helping us to make sure our students are thriving, our community is engaged, and our employees are empowered. So thank you all for being a part of the vision.
Thank you, Dr. McFarlane. You mentioned those students and panelists, so this would be a great time before we get their conversation started to introduce them, let them tell you a little bit about themselves, and we want to start with our students. And so we will begin with Daisha Spellman. Daisha, introduce yourself, tell us where you go to school, what you're involved in, a little bit about you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Daisha Spellman. I'm a Crowley High School senior, and I'm involved in things, leadership, student council, other clubs inside of my school. Yeah.
Fantastic. We're excited to have you here, Daisha. How's the start of school been for you?
It was pretty rough at first, but I've grown accustomed to just being online.
Good. Well, we hope to have you in person soon. All right, we have another student we'd like to introduce tonight. Bryce, will you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and where you go to school and what you're involved in.
Hey, my name is Bryce Harris. I'm a junior at North Crowley High School. I play basketball there, and I take engineering at the CTE Center.
Fantastic. How's your start of school been, man?
Same. It's kind of been rough trying to get used to like online instead of like face-to-face learning, but you know, I'm getting there. Well,
hey, when school starts in person, you're going to love the new CTE Center. It's phenomenal. It's going to be great. We're excited.
Yes,
we're excited to have you there. All right. Also on our panelists this evening, thank you, students. We're having another event tomorrow, Wednesday at noon. We'll have a different group of students on there, so please join us for both conversations. But on our panel this evening, we have Dr. Bowman from the Bowman Group. Dr. Bowman, introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you, Anthony and Dr. McFarlane. It's quite an honor to be here. My name is T. Bowman. I'm a Fort Worth native. I'm also a police practices expert. I help cities and school districts all over the country develop police departments and hire police chiefs. Also help them with other police problems. And so I personally am invested in CISD and honored to be a part of this event tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Bowman, for your leadership and expertise. We're excited to hear from you more. From our Crowley ISD team, we have one of our campus administrators with us, Mr. Heath West.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Heath West. I'm one assistant principal at North Crowley High School. Delighted to join this conversation tonight. My background, I was a former police officer with the Arlington Police Department. I actually worked under Dr. Bowman there. Then transferred to the Dallas ISD Police Department where I was an SRO. So, currently I'm an assistant principal at North Crowley High School and actually taught law at the CTE Center.
Thank you, Mr. West, for your service on our campuses and all you do for our students and staff. We appreciate you and appreciate you being here tonight. As Dr. McFarlane mentioned, we have several of our faith-based partners here. We know this is a community conversation. This isn't just a district conversation. This is a community conversation. So our faith-based partners do so many things to serve our students and staff across the district. We'll start with Pastor George Shelton from the Lord's House.
Okay, it's unmuted. Yes,
There you
I'm
go,
Pastor
sir.
George Shelton. Yeah, thanks, Anthony. I'm Pastor George Shelton from the Lord's House, and I've been part of the Crowley ISD in one way, shape, or form since 1996. I have two sons that graduated through Crowley ISD. My little boy won Mr. Crowley back in '99, and they won a state championship. My baby boy Trent graduated North Crowley, and Dr. McFarlane and the team has had him come and speak on several occasions to Crowley faculty and students. So I'm excited to be a part of this panel. Most people know me as the singing guy in the stands. I hadn't been to as many games as I used to be because my wife is battling an illness, but I'm always be a loyal supporter of Crowley ISD, and I'm so happy to be part of this panel. Thank you very much, Anthony.
Thank you, sir, for your voice tonight and your voice at those games and events. We appreciate you and all you do for us. Other faith-based partners with us this evening, Pastor Ray Baldwin from Turning Point Church. Pastor Baldwin, good to see you, sir.
Hi, Anthony. It's great to see you, and it's great to see everybody else. I'm Ray Baldwin. I'm the children's pastor at Turning Point Church. I've been involved with Crowley schools for 12 years, and specifically in one school, and that is Pointer Elementary. We have had all kinds of programs there. The best one we do right now is called Kids Beach Club. It's an after-school program. And I also work with Fort Worth PD as a CAPA, which is Clergy and Police Alliance. I get to ride out with them, but I also get to, I'm called out all the time. I get called out this afternoon, but I get called out to different situations where police need help to help in a situation where families are having troubles and that kind of thing. So it's an honor to be a part of this, and thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Baldwin. We also have Pastor Brendan Bagnell from Turning Point Church with us. Pastor Bagnell, please introduce yourself.
Yes, good evening. My name is Brendan Bagnell. I'm the executive pastor at Turning Point Church. And thank you, Dr. McFarlane and the school board for allowing me to be a participant in this. In addition to being a pastor, I also have 10 years of law enforcement experience. I was a Fort Worth police officer for 10 years. And I've also had the opportunity to get to know Dr. McFarlane and the school district over there at CISD in a variety of situations, just helping with them and helping raise up, a great generation of students and kids to be the next generation leaders. So I look forward to tonight's discussion and just the opportunity to help CISD move forward.
Thank you so much, Pastor Bagnell, and to all of our panelists, we thank you for taking the time to be with us. Dr. McFarlane, we already have our first question in the chat, and it's a perfect segue into our next agenda item. Ben Travis asked, what led to the decision to create our own police force here in Crowley? And Dr. Bowman from the Bowman Group has been helping us along with that process. Do you want to start talking about how we got here?
So sure. So as many of you know, we have had a relationship with Crowley PD and Fort Worth PD, as well as the Tarrant County Sheriff's Department as well for quite some time, so for several years. And so that has been a relationship that's worked well for us. But what we do know is that when we have three different agencies working and coordinating and attempting to cover 24 campuses with 80% in Fort Worth and 20% in Crowley, it creates sometimes a logistical challenge for us. And so we felt like for efficiency purposes, it would just simply make more sense for us to have our own police department, because we believe that that will provide us with a lot of other opportunities that we currently don't have working with three different departments. So really, us starting a police department is really about us searching for more efficiency, but also trying to ensure safety, ensure relationships are critical and they're in place. And so we just felt like this is a more efficient model for us to have our own department as opposed to working with three different departments.
Absolutely. And we've been working very closely with the Bowman Group. They've done this for other districts, help districts build their departments from the ground up, to know what to look for in police chiefs and police officers and staff. And so, Dr. Bowman, why don't you tell us a little bit about how that works and the expertise you provide for the Bowman Group and what you've seen here in Crowley ISD?
All right, certainly. Many school districts, Anthony, as you and Dr. McFarlane have indicated, have made the choice to create their own school district police department. And the fact of the matter is the police officers who work for the city of Crowley, their primary responsibility is the city of Crowley and not the Crowley ISD. The police officers who work for the city of Fort Worth, their primary responsibility is to the city and the citizens of Fort Worth, not the students and the staff and the parents at Crowley ISD. And so by creating your own police department, you now have the opportunity to train, to enculturate, to create the kind of police officers and the kind of police relationships with your students that you want Crowley ISD students to have with the police officers. Crowley ISD officers aren't going to be leaving working at a bar. They're not going to be leaving working traffic on the streets. They're going to be focused on the CISD campuses, building relationships with students. They're going to have consistent presence on your campuses. Because of the focus on a school district, they will completely understand school laws while really working with the students and the faculty to prevent crime. They'll be able to collaborate with outside law enforcement when and if necessary. But as Dr. McFarlane indicated, you will have more control over officer staffing. And quite frankly, officers now are starting to prefer opportunities to work for school districts as opposed to working for cities and other agencies. And you'll be able to control your staffing, and the officers who work for CISD will be able to go with the district anywhere you go, anywhere the teams go. They'll be able to accompany you and provide that added measure of safety. So all in all, as Dr. McFarlane indicated, it's just a more efficient and effective way to keep the student, staff, and the CISD family safe.
Thank you, Dr. Bowman. That's great information, and you bring great experience to our district with all the work you've done across the state. So we appreciate that input. Dr. McFarlane, you know, we have these students online. If we start with them, let's ask our students, what do you think we should be looking for in our police chief that we'll be hiring soon? And then as we build that department with officers, students, what kind of folks we should be looking at for our police department? Daisha, we'll start with you.
One of the main characteristics that I think should be taken into account is mental stability, especially before you start to get weapons that can severely harm someone. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's not really taken into account, and that's why a lot of situations escalate when they don't need to be.
That's great input. What else? What kind of characteristics would you want in an officer that you see there at Crowley High School?
The type of characteristics I would like to see, like she said, yeah, mental stability, you know, mostly a clean background, you know, of where they came, you know, just a good personality, being able to interact with kids, not just being seen as a police officer, just being able to react with kids, you know, interact with kids and just talk to them, just like they're any other person, just so the kids don't get scared of you or they don't feel like they have to talk to you any differently. Make it seem like you're their family, you know, that you're here to help. And that's what basically they need to do.
You know, Mr. Kirsten, one of the things I like to do is just take a step back. I want to just go take a step back. You know, I know in society and in as you're watching the news and hearing of different initiatives around, we have heard about the initiative to defund the police, and some people believe that police shouldn't be in schools, and some people believe that they should. I'd like to hear from the students' perspective first about how you feel about police presence in school. You know, your perspective on that. So, Elijah, I saw you just logged on. If you're able to click on Elijah, we'd definitely like to hear what you have to say about that. And Daisha, if Elijah's not on, Daisha, let's start there and let's talk about whether or not you believe whether or not you believe we should have police in school, and if so, then talk to us about what kind of police you think should be there.
Hello, Dr. McFarlane. Can you hear me well?
Yes, sir.
I will start off by saying, again, there's some things there that kind of just there's deficits in those relationships, especially when you're talking about communities and especially being a Black man in America. I would say first that there needs to be a relationship that starts there. As to, we know that we need policing within schools so that everything is facilitated correctly. But what are the relationships as it relates between the students and those that are policing and governing our schools? And I think that will be the biggest concern that I have as it relates to that.
Gotcha. Good point. Harris, you have any, just starting off first with the first question, I just want to know what your perspective is about police in schools and whether you feel like it's something we need or is there an alternative that you can think of that you'd like to share?
I feel like there's nothing wrong with having police officers there, as long as they come off as a good person, not as a threat to anybody, because when a police officer, you walking down the hallway, you see a police officer, some of them, they just standing there with a blank face, like just sitting there, some people can think, then he kind of seems sketchy, I don't know about him, but like all a police officer has to really do is just show some emotion, show good emotion, towards the students, show that you care about them, about their day and things that's going on. Don't just be sitting there waiting for something to pop off, and then that's when you're gonna react. That shouldn't be the only time you react. You should be reacting all the time,
Awesome. All right, thank you, Harris. It's definitely a good point there. Daisha, you want to add something to that? The first is, do you feel like we should have them in the schools? And if not, then what should we have? Or if you feel like we should, then what type should we have there in the schools?
I feel like in a way, yes, we should have police because they are fundamental, because you never know what can happen on a certain day. But I also feel like they shouldn't be hounding us and policing us over every little thing. Give us the decency and respect as not only students, but human beings. Don't just watch us like a hawk and like, oh, what is she doing? Where is she going? Like,
Mm-hmm. All right. Good point. No doubt. All three are very, very good points for sure. And so what else would y'all like us to know about police as we're looking for a police chief now? We're talking about the person that will actually lead that department, set the tone, set the culture and all that. What are the characteristics do you think that person should exhibit as a leader?
One of the many words that I've always heard since I've been at Crowley ISD is integrity. And that simply boils down doing the right thing even when no one is watching. Can us as well, you all as district leaders trust you to govern our students when we're not micromanager watching you. And I think that's the one thing that it boils down, and I think that's what it takes. Just having integrity, and having a passion to want to be around kids. We know that can be a difficult task at times. So those are the two things that I think are essentially vital.
Awesome. No doubt. All right. What do you think, Mr. Harris?
I think first off, an officer should be brave, not profile any kids, not assume any kids are bad, because I feel like they'll see a certain student look a certain way and they'll assume certain things. So, just just be brave in who they are and just be in control, and just be brave. That's all I gotta say. Just don't be scared to talk to students because you don't know if they're gonna react a certain way. Just always be open to everything. That's all I gotta say.
Awesome. Spell?
I agree with what Elijah said in saying they should definitely have integrity and also be open-minded instead of closed-minded and not assume certain things in certain situations. Yeah, like what Bryce said, about profiling certain students based on how they dressed or how they act.
All right, good deal. Kirsten, I know we had a few other questions.
Yes, sir. So a question that Mr. Travis asked again is, could you talk about, we've had SROs in school, both from Crowley PD and Fort Worth PD. Talk about your interactions with those officers through, middle school and high school in Crowley ISD. What's worked well and what can maybe be improved? Mr. Strong, we'll start with you. Daisha?
Oh, as far as like what can be improved, I feel like the policing itself could be improved. Like as far as like monitoring students without being overbearing, like not watching us like a hawk. And from my personal experience, I personally saw a police officer tase a student, and I felt like that was overstepping a boundary that shouldn't be crossed, because at the end of the day, we are still children. And as a police officer, your intention, like, yes, you should like break up the conflict, but your intention should not be to harm us in doing so.
Hey, Mr. Kirchner,
Absolutely, thanks.
I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
Just the system in general. One thing that I've always never liked is just when someone shows up to be a disciplinary. Let me see you on a day-to-day basis. How can you interact with me on a regular? And so I think, again, that's just what it takes, having those relationships where it's not only do you care if I'm in trouble, but do you care about me growing and advancing on a day-to-day basis? So that's what I would add to that.
Thank you. Bryce, is there anything like you'd like to share with your experience with having police officers in school up to this point?
I feel like I had a police officer like at my school. They'll be happy some days, like they'll show enthusiasm some days, but then the next day you'll go down and you'll just see them regular, like mean mugging, it's like, is he okay? Is anything going on with him? Like, you don't know. I feel like some students can get scared at that sometimes, because I know not every student perceives the same way. Some kids have trauma from past times or what happened to their family members. Just always have a smile on your face at least, or some type of enthusiasm, and being able to really, like Elijah said, have a relationship with the kids, talk to them every day. How's your day going? You can't talk to every kid, but you can talk to, a lot of students. Just being able to try to have relationships, trying to build them with other students.
That's great. The smile and those relationships, that's huge. Thank you, Bryce. Dr. McFarlane, we had a question in the chat about what would this look like with the CIC Police Department? Would they still work with the city police, particularly like they gave the example of football games or when other support may be needed? Our Crowley City Police Department would still work in conjunction with the local municipalities, correct?
That is absolutely true. We have a great relationship with the city of Crowley and and Tarrant County and Fort Worth, and so we do plan to continue that relationship. So as it relates to police department, I know we're talking about it today, but the reality is we're going to be hiring a chief soon, and then after that, it'll take probably about a 6-month period to actually build a force. And during that process, we will still be contracted with Crowley PD and Fort Worth PD throughout probably the remainder of this year until we get fully staffed. Because what we do know is that once we hire officers, several students mentioned at a conversation earlier about training. That hadn't come up yet, but several students mentioned training and relationships. And so we have to take time to do all that. So while we're doing that, we're going to be still relying on Fort Worth and Crowley PD and Tarrant County, quite frankly, to help us to continue to maintain a safe environment. So we do plan on continuing that relationship.
Great. And that actually brings us to our next question. Ms. Donna Heim asked, what kind of training and de-escalating individuals with mental illness and communicating with students with developmental disabilities might our police officers receive? And we know that there's a different training that comes with being in a school and working daily with students.
Yeah, no doubt. And we have, basically the good thing about it being our police department and we have an authority over it, all the training that we provide to our assistant principals or to our specialists or to people who are special educators that are trained to deal with students who have special needs, all those types of trainings, whether it's restraint or whether it's de-escalation or even just communication training, all those trainings that's available to educators, we can require for our officers, and we'll be able to do that depending on where they're assigned and all that. So it's a lot of different training, but we do know that we plan on providing them with the same training that we're getting and providing to our other employees. In addition, culturally responsive training, recognizing that we are an extremely diverse district. We have over 44 different languages spoken in our district. And so what that means is that we have kids from all different ethnicities and speaking all different languages, and parents with different languages that they speak as well. And so we recognize that our officers will have to be able to be culturally aware and understand what to do to de-escalate and what not to do as well.
Great. What fun little comment. This is a great idea that came in from D. Hunter there in our Q&A. I wonder if police could be afforded a specific time to introduce himself at their campus while dressed in normal everyday clothes, no uniform, no weapons. Just a great way to establish his first contact with students. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
As we're hiring our own officers and team.
No doubt.
Well, I have a question for someone on our panel that is in a really unique position, who's a campus administrator, but has also been a school SRO. And so Mr. Markeith West, kind of wearing both those hats. What are your thoughts on what we're talking about here with the training and building those relationships with students?
Yeah, like you said, I have the unique ability to kind of, now, being a assistant principal, but being a former police officer and also a SRO. I would say that through just reflecting back on everything that I've learned, looking back at an SRO, I would say the word that just pops in my head all the time, and I've been hearing it here on the panel, is just building relationships. I think one of the things that made me very successful as being an SRO was just, I learned how to build relationships. I got involved with the students. I knew who was on the dance team. I attended the football games. I knew the football players. I actually cared about, their grades. I wanted to know how they was doing. I knew the parents. And so in order to be successful, you have to be invested. And in order to be invested, you got to love what you're doing. So I think those are some of the characteristics I would say, to be in a successful SRO, you have to want to build those relationships. You got to be invested, and you got to love what you're doing. And as far as the training, I think, TCO, which is the governing agency of a police officer, do a great job of providing, some of the training. But like Dr. McFarlane said, there are some things that can be enhanced by the school district, which is also great. Like I said, I had the privilege of serving under Dr. Bowman in the city of Arlington, and we received some of the, I would say, some of the, just first class training. Even when I went over to Dallas, the things that I was taught there, always stuck with me. So, and a lot of things carry on with me now, even as an administrator. I learned how to, I learned how to handle situations. You learn how to use your voice. You learn how to read people also. So training is very, very important.
I have an additional question that was submitted, Mr. Kirshner, and it's really to the students, and it's from our board member, Mayfield. Dr. Mayfield submitted this question, and the question is to students. So what types of programs do you believe, as a student, what types of programs do you believe the officers or the chief should bring in to help address well-being of students? So what type of programs should the officers, should we have in place where police officers are working to address the well-being of students?
Yeah, I would immediately think about it from a social and emotional perspective, to be able to identify when it's it may not just be a child simply acting out, but something rather happening with them mentally. I think that's something that should be required. To be able to say, hey, something is wrong with this child emotionally, and maybe they need a conversation more than just me, forcing myself upon them to try to calm them down. That's what I would personally say.
Gotcha. All right. Good point, no doubt. Anything else you want to add, Harris or Spellman, to that?
Rather than the police officers bringing in those programs, shouldn't that be more of a social worker's job to relate on a social and emotional level, like the counselors and stuff like that?
So, that's a great question. So should, because, in some places, that's actually a part of the counselors and the officers are working together. In some places, they're separate. So I guess the question is, should there be a connection between, should the officers be providing social services, or should we leave that to school personnel? How would you prefer that to happen?
I feel like it should be left up to the counselors and the social workers, because they can relate on a social and emotional level to the students because they come in contact with them more often throughout the entire day.
All right.
Hey, Dr. McFarlane, I would just like to add to that. I've personally had the opportunity to talk with Mr. West, my assistant principal, and he was, giving me just a rundown of kind of the things that he has done similar to tonight. And one of the many things he said in regard to that was he mentioned something that he was willing to bring when he came to Crowley ISD was to help students that are not good with or not on task to graduate and things of that sort, because that is a deficit that comes with the community. So when you talk about programming, and it's not just how qualified are you, but how can you contribute to the well-being of our students within this district? These are the needs that they have. And so these are the things that we also need you to be willing to engage within to help promote the growth of our students here.
Gotcha. All right. Definitely good point. Anything to add, Harris?
No, so they pretty much said everything.
All right. So let me ask a different question. So do you prefer policing, mentoring, social programming, or a mix of all of them? And so the question is, so as we're trying to formulate this police department, should we have the department that's focused on policing, mentoring, or social programming, or a mix of those? And actually mentoring and social programming are kind of combined. So really policing or mentoring and social programming, kind of, as you think about the ideal department, what would that ideal department look like in relation to that question? Spellman, we'll start with you.
If we're speaking on the social aspect, will the officers be from different types of backgrounds as far as ethnicity, race, economic status? Because if we're talking about that, it's relating on different levels. Now, as far as policing, I feel like that's a totally different thing, because that's more of like discipline towards the students. Gotcha. And that's solely what the police department is for, but we're also trying to build relationships. So I feel like that's where the social workers come in between to provide that emotional and social support for the students.
Awesome. Got it. Awesome. That definitely makes a lot of sense. Now you bring up a point that I want to come back to in a second. And when we talk about the demographics of the department, you mentioned about gender and ethnicity and coming from different backgrounds. And so I want to go back and talk to y'all about, or hear from you all about whether that makes a difference or not. But let's stick with this question, and then we'll come back. Harris, we'll come to you. And the question really is, when we're talking about policing, our police department, you have a department that's either focused on policing or a department that's focused on mentoring, social programming, as well as policing, or a combination of both. Which would you prefer, Harris, if you had the opportunity?
First off, I feel like if they're coming into the school, I feel like socially first, more like socially and mentoring before policing, because the last thing that should be in their head is what they have to do to a kid. That should be the last thing that should be in their mind. So what should be put in their mind first is you getting to know the kids, being able to mentor first, and then the policing will come after if anything goes down, you know, because you don't want to just assume for the worst, because that's just a bad mindset. You know, you can prepare for the worst, but just hope for the best, you know. Gotcha. And not try to assume anything bad. Just try to come off as good first, you know, social and mentor.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Elijah, did you get a chance to answer that question?
No, sir. I would say that it shouldn't be a delegated task. You know, I think that's something that should be a passion that they bring. Like, for instance, you know, in any scenario with people, you have to be approachable. And, you know, when you talk about policing and then having that as something we're bringing history, you're kind of opening up the door for students to be like, you know what, now I want to be a police as well. And so I think just being approachable is the main part that is needed right now, especially.
Awesome. All right. So let's go back now and kind of follow up a little bit on your question, Ms. Spellman, about the representation and what the department looks like. So talk to me a little bit more about is that important? Is that something that we need to be considering? Should we be considering representation as we look at hiring of the police department?
Representation most definitely is an important factor, because what we see in the media a lot in this day and age is predominantly white cops going in on minorities. So in order to see or like to feel more comfortable and safer, students who are minorities would probably like to see people who look like them as a part of their authority, instead of someone who they already have a bad mindset going into it about because of what they're seeing in the media and what's happening right now in this world.
Awesome. All right. Thank you for that, Spellman. Appreciate you sharing your thought process behind that. So, Mr. Harris, talk to us about your perspective as it relates to representation as we begin to look for and recruit other officers to join our force. Help us understand how important or if representation is important for us.
I think representation is very important. Like I heard you say, somebody said in the chat that's a good idea that they come greet themselves in like regular clothes first, and introduce their life outside of just policing, because I know a lot of polices, they have a great background. Some of them had similar backgrounds as some of the kids that go to our school, but you'll never know that if they never, tell about their story. All the kids see them as a police officer coming to our school, coming to try to protect us, and that's all they see. That's all the students see, because none of the police officers have came to introduce themselves, just without no uniform or nothing. And I feel like that is really a need, because all we see on the media these days is bad cops, really. That's all they push on the media. And that's all, kids see is cops killing Black people, killing minorities and all that. And I feel like that would be very important to show that you're different than that, because that's all the media pushes these days, That's all kids see. And they're very against that. So yeah.
Got you. All right, thank you, Harris, for that. Mr. Strong, what's your perspective on the types of officers from a demographic standpoint that we should be recruiting?
I do think that's a much needed conversation, but most importantly, all ethnicities and people of different backgrounds. And I think the way that we can just categorize that is, when people are seeking these positions, are you aligning with the direction and the vision of the district? And when you can clearly align with what the district has in plan, for the coming years, then it's easy to find those candidates that will have a passion for everything that comes with the district and all of the things that come along with the students as well.
Awesome. Okay. All right. All right. Definitely good point for sure. All right. Kirsten?
Yeah, so Dr. McFarlane, a question that was asked is how important will it be that the chief and the officers that are part of the Crowley C force are also part of the community? You know, that they're not coming from other places just to work here, but they live and work and play in this community. And I know that's something we've talked about through this process, right?
What do you think about that, Bryce? Talk to us about the importance of. Talk to us about how you feel about that question.
About like people that already been in the community coming.
Well, I think the question dealt with the officers being a part of the community and not just coming into the community, the police, but be a part of the community. And so, what does that mean? Something? Does that make a difference? Should that have any bearing on our decisions?
That will definitely have like a kids will look at them differently just by the way they have presented themselves around the community. You know, it could go either way. It could go where they see him around the community, you know, and they see him as a very fun person and all, and they think he's a very cool person. But who knows if the students will ever have respect for him because, you know, he never put down authority. Or it can go another way where he's been in the community, you know, he can be a very entertaining guy, but, you know, he's not a type of person to play with, you know, type stuff. I feel like that type of person will be a better, like more respected type of person needs to be coming in, you know. If they're in the community, they need to show their dominance, you know.
Gotcha.
Not just be like a fun person, you know.
Gotcha. All right. Good point. Good point there, Harris. What do you think about that, Spelman?
Can you repeat the question one more time, please?
Yeah, so we're talking about how important, or is it important that the officers and the chief live in and are part of the community that they're working in and the schools they're working in?
I feel like it is important because in other communities and in other districts, things work differently. There are different rules, there are different laws and regulations as opposed to how it is in the city of Crowley. So I think it is important that they come from this community so that they have somewhat of an understanding of how things work here, as opposed to how things would work in, say, Burleson or Fort Worth ISD.
Right. Good point. Good point for sure. Sure.
All right, Dr. McFarlane, we have our faith-based partners who have been listening intently, taking a lot of notes because like they know this is a community conversation. And these are individuals that are in our schools every week and they're in our communities. They have relationships with families. And so I'd like to open it up to our pastors and just talk about the role churches can play in this and helping provide for a safe community, but also helping us build these relationships and provide healing and support where it's needed. Pastor Shelton, we'll start with you.
I'm sorry. I want to say that the students, not just saying, they really impressed me with comments they made. I have to piggyback on a couple of things they said, especially one about profiling. Profiling is such a problem in America, and not all policing, but so many times, not just police, people. My sons, when they were in high school, they wore braids. And people would profile back then that braids were kind of thuggish. But when they saw my son wearing braids, they said, oh, look at braids, not too bad. We know Pastor Shelton. We know he's an upstanding person. We know his kids make good grades. But so to me, you know, we get, as one of the students say, we got to make sure we stay away from profiling. That's why at my church, you know, we have all races, and I'm sure a lot of the other pastors the same way. People of all genders, whole 9 yards. But that's one of the key things is when we start this program, as we interview, or whoever do the interview, Dr. McFarlane, these officers, you know, we need to talk about those things because biases are there. And, you know, we've got to try to remove those biases, not just the police against the students, but students against policemen. So, you know, to me, that's so important that that we train people don't judge the book, as they say, by the cover. You know what I mean? Braids and tats do not mean that they're brats, you know? And so I just want to echo on that student and piggyback on what they said about we definitely need to stay away from the profiling. You know, I know it's not possible to say totally get it out the way, but that's really important that we address profiling. And thank you for the time.
All right.
Thank you, Pastor Shelton. Pastor Baldwin, talk about the Turning Point Church and the ministry you do there at Pointer and across the district, but also your role with the Fort Worth Police. What role do our faith-based partners play in this conversation? Pastor Baldwin, did I lose you? Oh, I think you're muted, sir.
Yeah.
There you go. Sorry about that.
Muted. It just automatically did that. All right. Well, a couple of years back, we noticed that something strange was going on, and that, you know, the police need different training. They need some better training. They need some specific training in school systems. And that's one of the things that I know that having your own police in the school system affords you to be able to train specifically for that. But we also noticed that young people need to be trained. Young people need to have understanding of who really has authority and a position of authority. So we started a program in our church called Children Behind the Shield. And it started out really simple. If you see a police officer driving down the highway, why don't you pray for them? If you see them in the store, go up to one and say thank you. If you see them in a restaurant, go up and say thank you. We even had children who would go up to police officers while they're eating their lunch and ask to pray for them and say thank you. So we're also training children to understand the position of authority and not to be afraid of police officers, but to be able to respect them. And I know that goes both ways, so please forgive that analogy. I've also noticed throughout the entire conversation, I appreciate these guys, these young people sharing their hearts, and the idea of having your own police is fantastic. And the reason for that is, you know, if you have Fort Worth PD come in, Crowley PD come in, their shifts change. Different people show up every day as an RSL. So here's what happens is they don't get a relationship with that person. They don't understand that person, what they're going through. That officer may have just come off of a major crime and came to the school. So one of the things that affords you as with a police group at your school is that they can actually be in the same school days, weeks, the whole school year, and get to know each child. They get to know each person. They have a relationship that matters, and they not only get to know them personally, but they get to know the way that they act, they react, they see them, they know their background, they know the areas where they have issues and problems, and they know how to help, and they can jump in at any time. So I hear that word throwing around all over the place, relationship. Relationship is the key thing, and your own police, that's the only way to build that.
That's great. Thank you, Pastor Baldwin. Pastor Bagnell, you've served as an officer in Fort Worth, and now you're in ministry serving our schools and our community. Talk about what you've heard the students say tonight, and what are you taking away from that?
Yeah, I'm thoroughly enjoying this conversation. I think especially in our current culture, these conversations are things that need to happen more often. And again, the relationship is the key across the board. Getting out from behind the keyboard and having face-to-face conversations is the key to moving this culture forward and moving ourselves forward. In regards to the law enforcement side, yeah, I do have sort of that both sides of the fence in the sense of You know, I'm now a pastor, but I was also a police officer. And the aspect of resources, one of the things that you all touched on earlier was the different sort of approaches that police officers can take: law enforcement, mentoring versus counseling, and those different things. And I think one of the things that as a faith-based partnership, we can help in, and one of the things that we did in Fort Worth, as Pastor Ray mentioned, the Clergy and Police Alliance, is developing relationships with resources. One of the things that, as a police officer, that I really appreciated was the ability to connect with other resources that were beyond where I could provide proper influence. You know, whether it be a situation where there's an issue where a child has some mental health challenges, where I can work with a counselor and maybe help identify, okay, this is not a law enforcement deal. This is not a law enforcement situation. This is a situation where somebody needs some counseling or some mental health resources, and being able to bring those resources in through relationships, through whether it be faith-based or counselors at the school. But also the key to that is what every single student said, is the officer having a relationship with the student. I think the biggest benefit of a school district police force is the officers developing that personal relationship with students, is exactly what every student has said. Because you know, we talked about the aspect, is it law enforcement first? Is it mentoring? And the way I look at it from my experience in law enforcement is sort of, law enforcement is there. You have the training. That's a skill set that an officer brings to the table and always has with him or her. But through the relationship, you almost develop sort of a parental type perspective. It's no longer, these are just students I'm protecting. These are my students. These are people I now care about, and I want to see them grow and develop. And I don't want anybody to hurt them. I don't want anybody to do something that's going to stop their growth. So whether that's bringing in counselors to help them, whether it's preventing somebody from physically hurting them, you have that parental care and parental desire to protect them. And in the appropriate time, maybe it is bringing in the law enforcement training to make sure nobody hurts those children. You know, we talk a lot about the relationship as far as helping the students become more comfortable with the police. I think it on the flip side of that coin as well is helping the officer become more comfortable with the students. Because a lot of times, in my experience and in talking with officers, especially right now, we talked about the media and the media perspective that is out there that focuses a lot on the negative. One of the things that I think will help with the officers is knowing that they're not being looked at as the bad guy. Because as they initiate the relationship with the student and they realize, you know what, they're real people, they know me as a real person, and we have a real relationship, all those other things start falling down and all the barriers start going away. And it really makes the difference. So when situations come up, we're no longer looking at each other as, you're a student and I'm a police officer, is, hey, this is Daisha and I know her, she's my friend, and I'm going to approach this situation from that relationship side, not just from a law enforcement perspective. And that makes all the difference in the world.
Fantastic. Thank you, Pastor Bagnell. Dr. McFarlane?
So yeah, I mean, there's definitely some good comments. I want to address a couple of the questions that are in the chat, if we have a second to do that.
Yes, sir. We had a question from Ms. Pignon about how can we make sure that our police are not intimidating our immigrant population.
Yeah, well, so first of all, I just like to start off just by saying that, of course, we have another session tomorrow, because I believe the question was about also representation, making sure, we asked the question earlier about representation of officers, and so we also know we need to have representation of student voices. And so tomorrow we will have at our session, we'll have voices from other students of other ethnicities. And so we want to make sure we're addressing population, the concerns of that population as well. What we know is that when a student enrolls in Crowley ISD, regardless of whether they are a U.S. citizen or regardless of what their citizen status is, our responsibility is to educate them. And that will be clear. That's another thing when we talk about our own police department. We have some flexibility and authority to be able to say when students are in our district, they are our students, regardless of their immigration status or regardless of their citizenship status. We can take a stand, and we will do that. I'm definitely sure about that. But what we will do tomorrow, again, we'll hear more from the Hispanic students' perspective and get their perspective on the police chief and also police staff. But I can tell you, just listening tonight from the students and hearing their perspective as it relates to representation, we know that we need to have a diverse staff. We know that our district is a diverse ethnicity, diverse economically, and we definitely will want a staff that mirrors the demographics of our district for sure. Also, I believe that there was a question concerning community policing, and Dr. Bowman, you may be able to give us some insight. I know there are several concepts, several terms as it relates to policing. Many of us have heard about school resource officers and then community policing and neighborhood policing and all that. So why don't you provide for us a little context about the different types of policing that could occur within our schools?
Sure. Community policing is a popular term that's been around since the 1980s, but it, in a nutshell, means that the police really seek the advice and feedback and input from the community that it serves. And so the police department, in determining what its priorities would be, would do exactly what you're doing tonight. They'll go to the students, they'll go to the families, to the community, to the staff, and ask you, how do you want to be policed? What are the highest priorities for policing for the district, and how do you want us to handle those priorities? And so that is the most popular and actually that's the most effective form of policing that we see. Other forms are more responsive, reactive, more law enforcement, policing oriented, and not service oriented. That's not the kind of policing that you want in the school district, and that's typically not the kind of policing you get when you have your own school police department. So the traditional police-oriented, law enforcement-oriented policing, they call that the warrior type of policing. You don't want that, you won't get that. The guardian type of policing is more community-oriented policing. That's what I would expect.
Gotcha. So another question I have, Dr. Bowman, is there have been this term called school resource officer, and then also you have a police officer that's serving in a school. What's the difference between those two? And from your experience, what's the most successful model for policing in schools?
Yeah, a school resource officer is a police officer who is on contract from or on loan under contract from a municipal agency or a sheriff's department who works in the school, who is assigned to work in the school. Their primary job, their primary responsibility is to the police department they work for. So an SRO or school resource officer from Fort Worth has his or her primary responsibility to the city of Fort Worth, but they are assigned to work inside a school in the CISD. So that's a better relationship than having a police officer show up on campus who is not assigned to the school, who doesn't know the students, who don't know the staff, and their responsibility is to police that campus. Having an SRO is a better relationship than that, but even better than either one of those two is to have a school district police department that does exactly what's been discussed tonight. The officers are in the schools building relationships, assigned to campuses. They get to know the students, they get to know the faculty and staff within the schools, they get to know the community, and they become a part of that community. Instead of policing over the community, they become part of the community. And that's really what you should seek and expect in a school district police department.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification for sure. Any additional questions, Kirshner, that you see in the chat that we need to address, or any additional topics that we need to discuss?
Yeah, I thought it was a good kind of question / comment that came in from Ms. Takia Lewis. I hope I'm saying that first name right, Ms. Lewis. But we've talked about the training for the officers, but also the training for the educators, especially when it comes to cultural competency. That some maybe would be inclined to bring officers in to resolve a situation, but if the teacher had that training, they could resolve it without even getting to the officer. So this, when we're talking about this training, it's not just for the Crowley ISD police force, it's for all Crowley ISD educators, right?
Yeah, no doubt. And you bring up a great point, and I think it's one that we probably need to address. One of the things that we're not doing, let's talk about what we're not doing. Well, we are not bringing in officers to deal with school discipline that's normally or expected to be handled by administrators and counselors and teachers. When we do that, when you see school officers, police officers being used to discipline classes, that's when you begin to see a criminalization of behavior in a classroom. And that's what we are, I think that's the one concern, quite frankly, that most adults have. If we have enough knowledge to be able to look at the data, we see that African-American boys and Hispanic boys are overrepresented in disciplinary infractions, which also means consequently they're oftentimes overrepresented in police infractions. Because what happens is once students get a disciplinary infraction, then if the police are engaged in a disciplinary action, it becomes a police incident, and now student has a record. Now they have a probation, and so now we have we've started the whole pipeline to prison, that we don't want to start. And so the good thing about building our own police department is that we can build in triggers and we can build in monitoring systems to make sure that things like that doesn't occur. Now, that's going to depend upon superintendent, it's going to depend upon the student services, it's going to depend upon the principal and assistant principal and the teacher. It's not just the police officer's responsibility, it is a collective team. And so that's why we have to be able to be on the same page about how do we deal with campus behavior, how do we deal with students misbehaving in class, or students playing the dozens, or students doing things that students do, and we address it with school behavior versus writing tickets for those kind of behaviors. Those are things that we got to be very, very clear about. And that's why we're having this conversation tonight. We'll continue to have conversations. I can tell you the next conversation will occur as soon as we hire the chief, because I want the chief to be able to hear what you all are saying. And as Dr. Bowman said, we really want to create this community policing model within our school so that we can have these chances to have conversations backward and forwards. But I can assure you that one of our primary responsibilities in starting this police department is to make sure that we do not create a system that ends up adding to the pipeline that we all want to prevent from going any further than it has already. So that's important for us. I do have is dealing with safety, Kirshner, but it's definitely off the topic of what we are a police chief, but it is about safety. So if we have other police chief topics, I want to talk about that, but since I have everybody, I do want to talk about this and its relatives to school safety.
Fantastic. Yeah, there is a question in here from an anonymous attendee that we've talked a lot about training. They're wondering who does this training? Is it CISD staff, state PD agencies? And it's a combination, right? They're going to be getting Crowley ISD training on Crowley ISD topics from Crowley ISD staff, but also state PD agencies will be playing a role in the certification and licensing of these officers, correct?
Yeah, no doubt. And we'll be relying on the expertise of Dr. Bowman and his connections and his network for police-focused cultural awareness training and trainings that are designed and targeted specifically for police, but also we have counselors who are trained. We have a whole social and emotional learning component that's from an educated standpoint. And so we'll also be dealing with that, delivering that as well. And then there may be other outside consultants or organizations that are doing culturally responsive training that we feel like will be good. Then we will also be able to put those together as well. One of the main responsibilities of the new chief will be to develop a training plan that's in alignment with our Vision 2025 that we'll bring back. That chief will have to present that to our board, to the community, and we'll be able to make sure that what we want to have as a part of the development of our new police department is actually baked into the procedures and the expectations that we have for them.
Right. And then there's one, before we get to your next topic, there's one more clarifying question. When earlier we were talking about the benefits of a district police force, you talked about the efficiency. And that's not only just efficiency of financial resources, but it's also the efficiency of time, their schedules, they're dedicated to serve our campuses. But there are also some financial resources that we spend a lot of money partnering with other municipalities that will now be used for Crowley ISD.
Right, and just to make it a tangible example, so we know that we have several campuses, of course, in Crowley, in the city of Crowley, in the jurisdiction of Crowley PD, and then others in the jurisdiction of Fort Worth PD. So let's assume that we have an officer that's assigned to North Crowley 9th. But we have an incident that's occurring at H.F. Stevens, which of course is in Crowley PD jurisdiction. And we only have 3 officers that are committed from Crowley PD. However, on this day, we only actually have 1 officer in place. And so we need an additional officer at H.F. Stevens. So in order for us to get the officer to leave from Fort Worth and to come over and serve at Crowley, there's a lot of logistics that must occur. And oftentimes, you don't have the time in the middle of a crisis or in the middle of an incident to make all the right phone calls, to get the right clearance, to have this person come over to this campus. And if this person is going to be out for extended periods of time, then we don't have the flexibility right now to say we're going to remove this officer from Summer Creek for today and assign him to H.F. Stevens for the next 2 weeks because we have an incident. We don't have that flexibility right now because we have multiple agencies that we have to coordinate with. Having one a point of contact, one chain of command helps us to be more efficient when we need to make position reallocations, but also when we need to respond in a crisis. Now, one thing I can say is this, is that I have not met one law enforcement officer when there is a crisis, a event, a gun event, or any kind of other serious event that they will respond and they will be present. It's just having it happen on a regular basis is a challenge because it's a challenge for Fort Worth PD because they need to know where their officers are in case they have an incident that they need to call their officers to something. And then also Crowley PD need to know where their officers are. And then we as a school district, we're sitting here saying, wait a minute, what about us? And so we are the second fiddle right now. And the financial burden of being the second fiddle, we're paying a financial burden of being a first fiddle, but we're actually the second fiddle. And so what we're saying is we want to prioritize our needs, and we think that we can keep a good relationship with Fort Worth PD, with Crowley PD, with Tarrant County, but we can prioritize the needs of our students and our campuses as well. And that's what we're attempting to do with this.
Great. Well, that's wrapping up the questions in the chat. You had another safety topic you want to talk about.
All right, so I know I didn't discuss this topic, but I'm gonna throw it out there because it's one that we have to make some decisions on. So we know at the end of last spring, before the pandemic, we know that our community, our Fort Worth community, we were having quite a bit of activity outside of our schools that involved weapons that were being brought into extracurricular events. I know I guess if you go back to January and February, we know, I mean, many of you have probably heard of several of the incidents. And so we made a decision to actually put metal detectors in place at athletic events at the end of the school year in an effort to try to deter the kind of behavior that was occurring throughout our community. And I recognize that metal detectors send several messages. Our hope at the time was that it would send a message that if you were considering any kind of behavior that's out of what we expect, then the metal detectors will be a deterrent. And so I would like to know from the students' perspective how they feel. I would like to know students' perspective on metal detectors at athletic events where we know we have large crowds. And I see you bucking your eyes, Elijah, but I need the honest facts. I can take it. Just tell me the truth so I can deal with it, all right? So we're going to start with you, Elijah.
Well, praise the Lord. I would say that's what we say when we about to say something serious.
All right.
I personally, I felt like a criminal. I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't like, and I understand it was safety measures and things of that sort, and it was very strict. I watched the video that you released. I know for me, it was, I typically stayed out of school because last year I was a junior class publicist, so I had to take pictures and whatnot, but I couldn't bring my backpack to the games. And I know that those were rules. I don't like the idea of it. That's just me personally. I didn't like it. I wasn't too receptive of it.
Okay, all right. And that's good to know. I appreciate you sharing that with me, and I appreciate you being courageous enough to tell me the truth. Thank you for that. All right, Ms. Spellman.
Me personally, it did make us feel some type of way, as in like, oh, we're doing something wrong. Oh, we're criminals. Like, we're bad. Like, it made us feel like we did something that made them have to go to this extent to where they have to treat us like criminals. Mm-hmm. In certain games, yes, I can understand why the metal detectors would be there, because at certain games, things do escalate. But I don't feel like it's something that needs to happen at every game. Like, I can understand just not bringing backpacks, that's fine. But metal detectors, I feel like it sends a message that it's dangerous to be here.
Awesome. I also want y'all to think about your friends, and I want you to think about your friends. I know what you're saying. I want you to also think about your friends and let me know kind of what you think they're thinking as well. All right. Harris, what about you?
Is this a question about like the metal detectors and the stuff?
Yeah. And the question was, I know at the end of the year and it was a reaction. Let me just be real clear. It was a reaction to all the things that were going on, and it was it was a reaction. And I know it was a reaction. And so what I want to know, because now we got time to plan, then we reacted to something. Nothing has happened at this point, but we do have the opportunity to be proactive one way or the other. So what I want to know, Bryce, is kind of how did it make you feel? And then the next question is, how did it make you feel? That's the first question. And then what impact do you think it had on others who if any? Let me just drop it at that, and let's start there.
I feel like personally it was a smart decision, because last year at the basketball games, I seen some videos, like disturbing videos of people coming in just shooting during the basketball game. Like that should never happen. Like during that time, people should just be able to watch the game, not have to worry about none of that. And a metal detector, you probably would have knew he was coming in with a gun. It's just simple as that. I feel like that needs to stay there, because it's not like a direct message to the students that you're scared of the students, but it's also outsiders. It's not just students coming to the game. You never know who can come. It's even people that come that doesn't go to the school. So it's not an insult to the students. It's really a protection to people that's coming from the outside coming in.
Gotcha. All right.
That's all.
All right. Thank you for that perspective, Harris. Elijah, did you want to add to your comment now? And my question now is, I know what you think, but think about those folks, the other students, the other probably 3,000-4,000 middle school and high school students that we are also trying to address their safety. So talk to me about what you think they're seeing and feeling.
Well, Dr. McFarlane, I firstly want to say I thank you for saying that it was a reaction, because I know the climate then was, we were seeing all sorts of things at the school, and that's just not something we want in the name of our district. As it relates to us as the student body and even thinking toward them is kind of just like, again, that relationship that I want to continue to reiterate. We're your students, and so you see us on a day-to-day basis. Now, you know Elijah is not about to breathe no gun up in here. And so, and I'm not imploring anyone to be biased, but I think that it should be different kind of as it relates from students to kind of just like patrolling on a day-to-day basis from those that may be visitors to a Crowley ISD sanctioned game or event.
Gotcha. All right. Good point. Good point. So you're saying, let me make sure I understood what you were saying, Elijah, because I think it was a great point. You were saying that we probably should rely more on our relationships with our students and making sure that we're patrolling those students. And then when we see guests, being monitoring those, because to your point, in most cases, it was with gun violence, not just in our district, but other places, there were people that didn't attend that school that were creating that, right?
Yeah, and Dr. McFarlane, I will say, especially when you talk about the relationship, I've noticed that, you know, the saying, conversation rules the nation, and even if it's just having a conversation like, this is not tolerable in the Crowley ISD district, and if you tell your students that those are expectations, now we can hold you reliable to not do something like that, and then we go from there, you know. Whereas if we know the guidelines, we can align with that, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Yeah, it does make sense. Makes perfect sense. Thank you for that. Spellman?
I don't feel like you should solely base it on relationships with students, because you never know you can have a conversation with somebody, but you never know what is going on in someone's head. And you never know what they're going through or what they're feeling in that day. And something could happen and it just makes them snap and they do something. And I also feel like if we're gonna continue to have metal detectors, I feel like there's a way to go about it instead of making us feel like we're cooped up and we're like prisoners. You know, like, don't tell us, oh, you can't do this and this and this and this. Like, yes, like, for example, concerts. When you walk through the metal detectors, they just make you walk through it. It's just normal. Like, they don't police you about it or anything like that. There's a way to go about it.
Yeah. And, you know, Ms. Spellman, I know you're right, because, you know, every college game, or professional game, or really any large gathering, now metal detectors are just a part of the process. However, I know it's different when we're talking about schools, and I know it's different when we're talking about high schools. And so, you know, that's a struggle because, you know, number one, we never want to send the message that we think our students are gonna misbehave. We don't want to send that message. But we also have to deal with reality that we know some will. And so the challenge that we're facing and that I'm facing, and that, you know, I got to make a decision on between now and the next 3 days, because we have a game between North Crowley and Crowley High, a football game that we haven't played before. And so we're going to be playing it this year. And so the question is, do we have metal detectors or not in those large environments? And so that's the question that I'm kind of struggling with right now, back and forth. And I appreciate you all for sharing your perspective, because we definitely don't want to send the message, an unintended consequence of what we don't want that to be a message we send to you all. But we do want to make sure that we send the message that we expect for folks to be safe. And we're going to do what we can to make sure they are.
Yeah. Dr. McFarlane, I just really quickly, I was on a football game in East Texas, 15 years ago, and no metal detectors. And yet someone who was not part of the school brought a weapon into the crowd. No one was hurt as far as gunshots were concerned, but after they fired the shots, students were hurt in the melee that happened trying to get out of there. I look at it differently. I see it as a way of protecting us, a way of making sure that we can go to an event and not be always concerned about the crazy things that could happen, because we're living in a crazy time. And you can't always be certain what the next person's about to do. I agree with Bryce. You know, sometimes it's necessary to have these things in place, and there's a reason for it. I would hate for us to take them out and something crazy happens and one student is not going home. And that's something that really concerns me as a pastor and just as a person. I'm a grandfather. If I take my grandchildren to a game, I want to know that they're going to be safe and go home with me later.
Great point, Pastor Baldwin, for sure. Dr. Bowman, I know you've been around a lot of different places and you've seen a lot. Just any perspective on this topic? I know I've kind of hijacked this meeting, but we're talking about something else now. But it is still safety. So, Dr. Bowman, what's your perspective on the topic?
Safety first. Safety first. Lives are important. You can't replace a life. You can bandage up hurt feelings, but you cannot replace a life. And any day of the week, I'm all for doing what it takes to keep our precious children and our staff and community safe.
All right.
Agreed, yeah.
All right. So, hey, I definitely appreciate this conversation tonight. And as we mentioned, we plan to have a series of these conversations. We're talking about safety right now. In the future, we may be talking about something else. But we think a part of our vision, we have a new strategic plan, and it's called our Vision 2025. And what this plan clearly identifies as 3 goals. One is that we'll have thriving students. And number 2, that we'll have an empowered staff. But number 3, we'll have an engaged community. And to me, this is what an engaged community looks like. It's like you're able to share ideas. We'll take some of these ideas and we'll use them. Some of them will take them and say, well, maybe not right now, but maybe later. But the key point is we want to hear your voice. And I appreciate, the students, Bryce and Elijah and Daisha. I mean, it takes some courage to be on here with some adults talking about a tough topic. But I want you to know that we see you and that we hear you and that we're going to govern ourselves accordingly because we all want the same thing, and that's for you to thrive. Kirshner, I think I'm done. I think I have what I need, but I do know that we had a couple board members on. I know we have, I believe we have Dr. Mayfield on, and Dr. Mayfield, I don't know if you would like to share any, if you can share, we may be able to send you a link to allow you to share if you like to. And then also I know Ms. Robinson was on as well. And these are both board members and parents of Crowley ISD. So I definitely will be remiss without giving you an opportunity to share if you'd like to share before we close.
Thank you, Dr. McFarlane. I saw the mute and unmute option come up, so I was like, yes, I get to say hi. But I just want to say thank you for allowing us to have this forum with so many different thoughts and perspectives. I think the young gentleman said it earlier about the conversation and just being able to break down barriers and fully understand where everyone's coming from, just from a simple, acknowledgement and having these, voices to be heard. I greatly appreciate this. Thank you, Dr. Bowman, for your time, and all of the ministers and pastors that are present this evening, and the parents that have joined, and the students, of course. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciated, Dr. McFarlane and Mr. Kirshner.
Well, we thank you, Dr. Mayfield, and your voice was loud and clear in making sure we hear our students' voice. And so we appreciate you and appreciate your leadership as well. Ms. Robinson.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to speak. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you to the panelists and students. And I echoed Dr. Whitson Mayfield's comments. I had an opportunity to serve on the panel with Elijah Strong earlier today from 5:30 to 7. It's the Leadership ISD Student Voices. And so this topic is something that we can even take back to the student voices because it is relevant to our district. It is relevant to the times that we're in now. And so I just appreciate everything that was discussed. I appreciate the students just being authentic and sharing their thoughts with us. And so again, just thank you. I look forward to seeing what develops from this, from our police force, and how that we can make it, I guess, meaningful to our district.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, thank you, Ms. Robinson, as well. And we definitely plan to include student voices, not just in this decision, but it's important for us to include them as we make decisions throughout the year. So I definitely appreciate you for that as well. And also Miss Davis, I know I saw Miss Davis online as well. And so Miss Davis, if you're online, if you'd like to share as well.
Dr. McFarlane, looks like she just got kicked off within the last 30 seconds or so. She's been on all evening.
Okay.
We're making sure. Miss Davis, you there? Yeah, I think she got kicked out.
Okay. All right. Well, again, I definitely appreciate everybody. Also, we do have another town hall. We wanted to make sure we had town halls at different times to give parents an opportunity and others an opportunity. Tomorrow, I believe it is at what time is it tomorrow, Kirshner?
We have our town hall tomorrow at noon.
Noon.
We'll have some more students on there and everything. And it looks like Mia Hall, is that you raising your hand? Sorry, it looks like Miss Mia Hall is coming back on as a panelist. Miss Hall, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry about that.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt Dr. McFarlane closing us out, but I would be remiss if I didn't thank Dr. McFarlane and his leadership team and all of you in Crowley ISD who make sure that you give us the platform to have voice. I appreciate that at every turn and path, each time we faced crisis or just have questions as we move forward, there's always a platform to engage our stakeholders, to include our students, our parents, our church leaders, and our entire community. So I wanted to say thank you again for that, and I look forward to the convening on tomorrow night. Thank you.
All right. No deal, no doubt. We definitely appreciate it. Tomorrow it will be at 12. Do we have tomorrow evening also, Kirsten, or just tomorrow?
Tomorrow noon for tomorrow. We wanted it
at 12 noon. And then, of course, after that, again, this is the beginning. I want to make sure we're clear. This is the beginning. Once we get the chief on, we'll have a series of sessions to help him to understand what kind of issues from a student perspective he needs to be strategizing around. So this is the beginning. Thank you all for being a part of the beginning. We'll be able to look back in 2 or 3 years and we'll have this award-winning department and we will be able to say that we were the ones who created the ideal. So thank you all for doing your part and for being a part of this solution. Appreciate it. Let's have a great night. See you.
Thank you all.